I let another woman raise my daughter. For 11 years. And the part that really gets me, the part I've never actually said out loud, is that I used to call it love. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That I was protecting her. That I was being selfless. I don't believe that anymore. I don't even know when that lie started to crack. Or maybe it didn't crack, it just wore down, slowly, over time, until one day I couldn't pretend it still made sense. And now I'm sitting here, trying to say this out loud, and I almost wish I hadn't started. Because once I say it, once I really say it, it stops being something I can soften or reshape in my head. It just is. I've been staring at this wall for, I don't know, 20 minutes? Maybe longer. I had this whole version of this planned. You know, structured, calm, like I had perspective. Like I understood myself. I don't understand why I did what I did. Not fully. I can explain it, sure. I've gotten very good at explaining it. But understanding it? That's different. So I'm just going to talk. And if it comes out wrong or messy, or if I contradict myself, I probably will. That's the truth of it. Her name is Maya. She's 23 now. 23. I still catch myself thinking of her as a kid sometimes. Like she's going to come running down the hallway or ask me for something small and ordinary. But she's not that anymore. She's fully herself. And she's incredible. She's sharp. Like quietly sharp. Not loud about it. You almost miss it if you're not paying attention. And she has this dry sense of humor that just slips in when you least expect it, and suddenly you're laughing and you don't even know when it started. And her laugh. I didn't expect that. The first time I really heard it, not just noticed it, but heard it, I had to leave the room. I couldn't stay. Because it sounded exactly like mine. Exactly. Same pitch, same rhythm, that little catch at the end. And I remember standing in the hallway, just trying to breathe because it hit me all at once, this realization that something of me had always been there, even when I wasn't. She doesn't know that. She doesn't know a lot of things. Okay. I need to go back. Because none of it, makes sense without the beginning. And the beginning isn't dramatic. That's part of the problem. If it had been worse, if there had been something obvious to point to, it would almost be easier to explain. I was 31 when I had her. Which, I know, sounds like I should have had my life together. I thought I did. On paper, I absolutely did. I was married. We had a house. We had plans. Real plans. The kind people are proud of. The kind that make your parents relax a little. Like, okay, she's going to be fine. Everything looked right. And that's the thing no one really warns you about. How dangerous looking right can be. Because when everything around you looks like it's supposed to, it becomes very easy to ignore the part inside you that's not okay. My husband, Daniel, I need to say this clearly. He wasn't a bad man. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant. He wasn't any of the things that would make this easier to justify. He was kind, steady, reliable, and completely wrong for me. And I knew that. I knew it before we got married. I knew it walking down the aisle. I remember it so clearly it actually makes me uncomfortable to think about now. Standing there, in that dress, looking at him, and having this very quiet, very certain thought. This is a mistake. Not panic. Not nerves. Certainty. And I still said my vows. I still smiled for the photos. I still thanked people for coming. I still told everyone how happy I was. Because what was I supposed to do? There were hundreds of people there. My mother had spent months planning every detail. Daniel was standing right in front of me, looking at me like I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. And I was going to what? Stop everything? Walk away? No. I told myself it was just nerves. Cold feet. Everyone feels this way, right? That's what people say. I got very good at that. At taking something real and turning it into something manageable. Something I could ignore. So we got married. And for a while, it was fine. That's the word that always comes back to me. Fine. Not terrible. Not painful. Just flat. Neutral. Like I was living someone else's life but doing a decent job pretending it was mine. And then I got pregnant. And I thought, okay, this is it. This is the thing that changes everything. This is the thing that's going to make it all feel real. Meaningful. Right. I thought having her would fix whatever was missing. Maya was born in February. It was a Sunday. Snowing outside. I remember that part so clearly. The room felt warm and quiet, and everyone was moving around me like they knew exactly what they were doing. And then the nurse put her in my arms. And I wish I could tell you it was instant. That something clicked into place. That I felt that overwhelming love people always talk about. I didn't. I didn't feel nothing. That's not true. I used to say that, but it's not accurate. What I felt was fear. Not normal, new parent fear. This was heavier. Like something pressing down on my chest. I looked at her, this tiny, perfect person, and all I could think was, I can't do this. And I didn't understand why. Because it wasn't about diapers or sleep or any of the practical stuff. It was deeper than that. Something I couldn't name at the time. Looking back now, I think a part of me already knew what I was going to do. I think, somewhere under everything, I knew I wasn't going to stay. We lasted 2 more years after that. 2 years of pretending. Of telling myself things would settle, that I would grow into it, that something would shift. It didn't. Maya was almost 3 when I finally said it out loud, that I wanted a divorce. And that part, I don't regret. I really don't. Ending the marriage was the right decision. I was miserable. Daniel deserved someone who actually wanted to be there. Maya deserved something better than 2 people slowly fading inside the same house. That wasn't the mistake. What came after? That's where everything started to unravel in ways I didn't even recognize at the time. What came after? That's the part one still struggles to look at directly. Because it didn't fall apart all at once. It wasn't some dramatic collapse where everything breaks and you're forced to face it. It was slower than that. Messier. The divorce dragged on in this exhausting, grinding way. Paperwork, arguments, long conversations that went in circles. Nothing explosive, just constant friction. Like something wearing you down over time. And I wasn't okay. I want to be honest about that, even though it doesn't excuse anything. I was drinking more than I should have been. Not every day, not in some obvious, visible way. But enough. Enough that I started needing it. Enough that I didn't have to sit with myself for too long. I was making decisions that didn't align with who I thought I was. Or maybe they did, and that's what scared me. It's strange, I was 33, but mentally I felt younger. Not in a good way. More like I had skipped something important somewhere along the line. Like I had followed this script for so long, school, marriage, house, baby. And when that script disappeared, I didn't know who I was without it. So I just drifted. And in the middle of all that, I met someone. I'm not going to say his name. It doesn't matter. What matters is what he represented. He was everything Daniel wasn't. Loud. Unpredictable. Complicated. The kind of person who walks into a room and shifts the energy immediately. And when I was around him, I felt awake. That's the word I kept using. Alive. Awake. Like I had been underwater for years and suddenly I could breathe again. And I held on to that feeling way too tightly. Looking back now, I can see it for what it was. I was starving, for attention, for intensity, for anything that felt like mine. And I confused that hunger with love. Maybe there was some love there. I don't know. I don't think it matters anymore. What matters is that he didn't want children. That was clear from the beginning. He didn't hide it, didn't soften it. He had his own life, his own chaos, and a 3-year-old didn't fit into that picture. And this is where people usually start to pull away from me when I tell this story. Because this is the part that sounds unforgivable. And I get it. I really do. But I need you to hear the whole thing. I chose him. I chose that life. Freedom, unpredictability, not having to be responsible every second of the day, over being fully present for my daughter. Not forever. Not in some permanent, dramatic way. But for a stretch of time, a year, maybe a little less, I stepped back. I let Daniel take primary custody. And I didn't do it because I had to. I wasn't forced. There was no legal battle I lost, no court decision that made the choice for me. I asked for it. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, and he was going over options, explaining what things could look like, and I said, God. I said, it would be easier if she lived with him. Easier. That's the word I used. And I remember how it felt when I said it. Like relief. Like I had just solved a problem. I didn't think about what that word actually meant. Not in that moment. I didn't sit there and unpack it. Easier for who? Easier in what way? I just grabbed onto it. And I built a whole justification around it after the fact. Daniel was stable. He had the house. The routine. He was calm in ways I wasn't at the time. I told myself Maya would have more consistency with him. And those things were true. But they weren't the reason. Not really. The real reason was that I didn't trust myself to be what she needed. And instead of trying, I stepped away. And I wrapped that decision in language that made it sound responsible. Thoughtful. Selfless. I said I was putting her first. I want to stop here for a second because I know, believe me, I know what this sounds like. I've heard every version of it in my own head. I've sat in my car at night and gone over it, word for word, asking myself how I could have said that so easily. How I could have let that decision stand. So I'm not asking you to understand it. I'm not even asking you to forgive it. I'm just telling it. Because I've never actually said it this plainly before. Not without softening it. Not without adjusting the edges so it felt more acceptable. This is the truth of it. Daniel was a good father. He really was. And that matters. It matters more than anything, honestly, because if he hadn't been, I don't know what this story would look like. He created a stable home for her. Structure. Routine. The kind of environment I kept telling myself I couldn't provide at the time. And a few years later, he remarried. Her name was Carol. And she was steady. Warm in a very uncomplicated way. The kind of person who doesn't make things harder than they need to be. She loved Maya without hesitation. Without confusion. No push and pull. No distance. Just love. And they built something real together. A whole life. School routines, dinners, holidays, inside jokes, things that repeat, things that create a sense of home. And I existed around the edges of that. I had my weekends. Holidays. Summers. I showed up. That's important to me, even now. I showed up. But I wasn't really there. Not in the way that mattered. I would sit at her school events, watching her on stage, and my mind would drift somewhere else. I'd be counting down the time until I could leave, until I could go back to my own space, my own life. I hate admitting that. I hate how true it is. And she noticed. Of course she noticed. Kids always notice more than you think they do. She started asking questions when she was around 7, maybe 8. Small questions at first. Mommy, why don't you live with me? And I had this answer ready. I had practiced it. About how families can look different, how love doesn't change just because people live in different houses, how she was loved in both places. All technically true. But not the truth. Not the full truth. The truth was, I didn't know how to be her mother without also being Daniel's wife. Those two roles had been tied together in my head for so long that when one ended, I didn't know how to hold on to the other. And being alone with her, really alone, really responsible, it scared me. Because there was nowhere to hide in that. No one else to absorb the pressure. Just me, and her, and the reality of what I was supposed to be. So I convinced myself she was better off. That she had everything she needed there. That Carol filled the space I couldn't. And the more I told myself those things, the more they started to feel factual. Like something proven. Instead of something I had chosen. Looking back now, I should have seen it. I should have seen what I was doing. How I was slowly stepping further and further out of her life while telling myself I was still present. But I didn't. Or maybe I did. and I just didn't want to look at it too closely. Because if I had, I think I would have had to admit something I wasn't ready to admit yet. And what happened next? That's the moment I couldn't avoid it anymore. And what happened next? I didn't have a way to explain it at the time. I still don't, not completely. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden collapse, no emergency room chaos like you see in movies. It was quieter than that. Maya got sick. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. Just little things. She was tired a lot. Low energy. She'd get these fevers that came and went. Nothing extreme, nothing that made you panic right away. But it didn't go away. Weeks passed. Then months. And Daniel called me one morning. I remember this so clearly it actually makes my chest tighten. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for coffee, just staring at nothing, and my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I don't know why. It was just one of those moments where you hesitate for no reason. But I did. And his voice was different. Controlled but tight. Like he was holding something in. He said, "They think it might be something serious. They're running more tests." And I just froze. I don't remember what I said back. I must have said something. But it didn't matter. Everything kind of narrowed in that moment. Because suddenly all the distance I had created, all the space, all the justifications, it didn't feel safe anymore. It felt fragile. Like something I had been hiding behind, and now it was cracking. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask if I should come. I just got in my car. 3 hours. I don't remember the drive. I genuinely don't. It's just blank. Like my brain skipped it. And then I was there. Walking into the hospital, asking for her room, hearing my own voice sound strange, like it didn't belong to me. And when I walked in, she looked so small. That's what hit me first. Not the machines, not the hospital bed, not the monitors. Just how small she looked. And she looked at me, like she wasn't surprised, like maybe she had expected me, and I just started crying. Immediately. No control over it. No build-up. Just a gone. I couldn't stop. And the thing is, she had never really seen me cry before. Not like that. Not openly. Not without trying to pull it back together. So she looked at me, confused for a second. And then she said, "God, I hear this in my head all the time." She said, "Mom, it's okay. I'm okay." 12 years old. Sitting in a hospital bed. And she was comforting me. At the time, I didn't fully understand why that moment stayed with me the way it did. I thought it was just fear. Just the situation. But it wasn't. It was what came after. Weeks later, after we knew she was going to be okay, it turned out to be an autoimmune condition, manageable, not life-threatening. I was sitting at home, and that moment just replayed. Over and over. Her voice. Her face. The way she said it like it was her job to reassure me. And it hit me. Hard. She had learned to take care of my emotions. My child had learned how to manage me. So I wouldn't disappear. So I wouldn't get overwhelmed. So I would stay. I had trained her to do that. Not intentionally. Not consciously. But through absence. Through inconsistency. Through being someone she couldn't fully rely on emotionally. And when I realized that, I couldn't breathe. I remember sitting on the floor, like physically sitting down because my legs just gave out, and trying to inhale and feeling like there wasn't enough air. Because it wasn't just one moment. It was a pattern. Years of it. Little things I hadn't noticed. Or hadn't let myself notice. And suddenly I could see it all. All at once. That's when something actually changed. Not in a clean, "I've learned my lesson" kind of way. Nothing that simple. More like, something broke open. And I couldn't close it again. I couldn't go back to the version of the story where I was doing the best thing for her. That version didn't hold anymore. So I did something I should have done years earlier. I started therapy. And I mean actually started. Not the version I had tried before, where I went in, said the right things, showed how self-aware I was, and then left unchanged. No. This time, I told the truth. Or at least I tried to. Her name was Dr. Reyes. And she didn't let anything slide. That's the only way I can explain it. I remember our third session, not the first, not the second, because I was still performing a little at the beginning, and she asked me a question. Simple question. She said, "What do you think your daughter needed from you that she didn't get?" And I had an answer ready. Of course I did. I talked about stability, about consistency, about how Daniel's home provided that in a way I couldn't at the time. I said all the things I had been saying for years. And she just looked at me. Not judgmental. Not harsh. Just steady. And then she said, "That's what you tell other people." Pause. What do you actually think she needed? And I didn't answer right away. Because something in me knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to take it back. And when I finally said it, it wasn't complicated. It wasn't layered or nuanced or anything like that. It was simple. She needed me. That's it. She didn't need perfect. She didn't need stability in some abstract, idealized way. She needed me to show up. To be there. To choose her, over and over again, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was uncomfortable, even when I didn't feel ready. And I hadn't done that. For years. I hadn't done that. I broke down in that office. Not in a quiet, controlled way. Fully. Because once I said it, once I admitted it without hiding behind anything, there was nowhere else to go. No more explanations. No more softened versions. Just the truth. And the truth was devastatingly clear. But here's the part that's harder to admit. Even after I realized all of that, even after everything cracked open and I could finally see it, I still found a way to make another mistake. And this one was quieter, but in some ways, just as damaging. Because this time, I thought I was doing the right thing. And that made it even harder to see what I was actually doing. And that's the part that still confuses me, even now. Because I thought I had finally figured it out. I thought, okay, this is it. This is the turning point. I see it now. I understand what I did wrong, and now I'm going to fix it. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be the mother she needed all along. And that sounds right, doesn't it? It sounds like growth. Like accountability. But the way I went about it, I don't think it was really about her. I think, if I'm being completely honest, I think it was still about me. I started calling more. Texting more. Asking questions I hadn't asked before. Trying to be involved in everything. School, friends, how she was feeling, what she was thinking. And on the surface, it probably looked like I was finally stepping up. But underneath that, there was urgency. This almost desperate need to make up for lost time. Like I could somehow compress 12 years into a few months if I just tried hard enough. I wanted closeness. Fast. I wanted her to open up. To trust me. To let me in. I wanted to feel like her mother again. And I didn't stop to think about what she needed in that moment. Because by then, she was 15. 16. She had a life. A full life. She had routines, friendships, inside jokes with people who had been there consistently. She had Carol, who had been a steady presence in all the ways I hadn't. And suddenly I was there. Not gently. Not gradually. Just there. Wanting something from her that we hadn't built. Wanting emotional intimacy that didn't have a foundation yet. And she felt that. Of course she did. She didn't have the language for it, not exactly, but she felt it. That pressure. That expectation. And she pulled back. At first, it was subtle. Shorter responses. Less enthusiasm. A kind of carefulness in how she interacted with me. And I noticed. God, I noticed. And instead of slowing down, instead of asking myself why she was pulling away, I pushed harder. More calls. More effort. More trying to prove that I was there now, that I was different. And looking back, I can see how overwhelming that must have been for her. It wasn't just connection I was offering. It was need. My need. My need to feel like I hadn't completely failed. My need to repair something I had broken. And she could feel that it wasn't really about her. Not fully. That realization didn't come immediately. At the time, I told myself she was just being distant. That she was a teenager, that it was normal. And some of that was true. But not all of it. There was something else there. Something I didn't want to look at yet. We had this moment. She was 17, the summer before her senior year. I remember it so clearly because I had rehearsed it. Not word for word, but the idea of it. I was going to apologize. Not everything. I wasn't ready for everything. But something. Enough to acknowledge the gap between us. We were sitting together, just the two of us. And I remember feeling nervous. Which is such a strange thing, to feel nervous talking to your own child, but that's where we were. And I said it. I told her I was sorry. I told her I knew I hadn't always been as present as I should have been. I told her she deserved better than what I gave her. And then I waited. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, quiet. And that silence, it stretched. Longer than I expected. Long enough that I started to feel that familiar panic, that urge to fill the space, to fix it, to say something else. But I didn't. I just waited. And finally, she looked at me and said, "I know you love me, Mom. I've always known that." And I remember feeling this immediate relief. Like, okay, we're going to be all right. She knows I love her. That's the important thing, right? But then she added, "I just don't always know if you know how to love me." I don't think I reacted right away. I think I just sat there. Because it didn't feel like an attack. That's the thing that makes it so much harder. She wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing me. She was just stating something. Calmly. Honestly. Like it was a fact she had already accepted. And that kind of truth, it lands differently. Because there's nothing to push against. No emotion to argue with. Just clarity. I've replayed that sentence so many times. Over and over. Trying to hear it differently. Trying to soften it. But I can't. Because she was right. She was right. I loved her. Completely. But loving someone and knowing how to show up for them in the way they actually need, those are not the same thing. And for a long time, I didn't know the difference. That moment stayed with me. It didn't fix anything instantly. It didn't suddenly make our relationship easy. But it shifted something. Or maybe it just made something impossible to ignore. Because after that, I couldn't pretend anymore that effort alone was enough. That showing up now erased not showing up before. It doesn't work like that. She left for college the next year. Far away. The Pacific Northwest. And I told myself not to read into that. But I did. Of course I did. Because distance had already been such a defining part of our relationship. And now it was physical too. We stayed in touch. Texting mostly. Some calls. It was better than before. But still careful. Measured. Like we were both aware of the history sitting underneath everything we said. Like we were both trying not to push too hard in either direction. And then, slowly, something started to shift. Not in a big, obvious way. Just small things. She called me one night. Not texted. Called. And that alone felt significant. She had a hard week. Classes, stress, something with a friend. I don't even remember the details. What I remember is that we talked. For 2 hours. And it felt easy. For the first time in a long time. There wasn't that tension. That carefulness. We just talked. And when we hung up, I sat there for a minute, just holding my phone, thinking, was that real? Did that actually just happen? And then it happened again. Not immediately. But eventually. Another call. Another conversation that didn't feel forced. And I didn't rush it this time. I didn't try to turn it into something bigger. I just let it be what it was. And maybe that's what made the difference. But even then, even as things started to feel more natural between us, there was still something sitting underneath it all. Something I hadn't said. Something she didn't know. And every time things felt a little closer, a little more real, that thing got louder. Because I knew. At some point, I was going to have to decide whether to tell her everything. And I didn't know what that would do to us. And that question, it didn't go away. If anything, it got louder the closer we became. Because it's one thing to keep a distance when everything already feels fractured. It's easier, in a way. There's less to lose. But when things start to feel real again, when there's something actually there between you, that's when the truth starts to feel dangerous. She graduated last spring. I was there. Front row. Daniel arranged it, actually. Which, honestly, still says a lot about the kind of person he is. Because he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to make space for me in that moment. But he did. And I sat there, watching her, and I started crying before she even walked across the stage. I couldn't help it. It just came out. And the woman next to me leaned over and handed me a tissue and said, "Is that your daughter?" And I said yes. Of course I said yes. And she smiled and said, "You must be so proud." And I was. God, I was. But there was something else there too. Something heavier. Because as I watched her walk across that stage, confident, steady, completely herself, I had this thought that I couldn't shake. I didn't build this. Not really. I was proud of her. But I was also aware, in a way I couldn't ignore, that so much of who she had become happened without me. Or maybe, not without me. But in spite of me. And I don't say that to be dramatic. It's just true. After the ceremony, we took pictures. The four of us. Me, Maya, Daniel, and Carol. And if you saw that picture, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know the history sitting underneath it. The gaps. The years that didn't line up. It would look like a complete family. And maybe, in some way, it is. Just, not in the way people expect. We've gotten closer since then. Not perfectly. Not suddenly. But steadily. She calls me sometimes. We have inside jokes now, which still feels strange to say out loud. Like I'm borrowing someone else's experience. She asks my opinion. Not about everything. But sometimes. And when she does, I feel it. The weight of it. The trust. And I try, really try, not to take that lightly. A few months ago, she told me she started therapy. And the way she said it, it wasn't casual. She kind of looked at me, sideways, like she was watching my reaction. Like she was measuring something. And I said, "Good." I said, "I hope she's as honest as mine made me be." And she laughed. That same laugh. And she said, "We'll see. We'll see." I think about that a lot. Because I don't know what she's working through. I don't know how much of it includes me. And part of me wants to ask. Part of me wants to sit her down and say, "Tell me everything. Tell me what I did. Tell me what it felt like." But I don't. Because I'm trying, this time, to let her have her space. To not make it about my need to know. But there are things she doesn't know. Things I've never told her. Not the full version. She knows the outline. She knows I wasn't always as present as I should have been. She knows I struggled. But she doesn't know the specifics. She doesn't know what I said in that lawyer's office. She doesn't know that I chose the word easier. She doesn't know what that word really meant. And she doesn't know about that night. I don't even know why that one sticks with me the way it does. Maybe because it was so small. So ordinary. No big moment. No argument. No crisis. Just a decision. She was with me for the weekend. She was asleep. And I had plans. I don't even remember what they were. That's the worst part. Whatever it was, it mattered to me then. More than it should have. And I called Daniel. And I asked him to come get her early. She never knew. She was still asleep when he picked her up. There was no scene. No confusion. No questions. Just absence. Clean. Quiet. Invisible. And I went on with my night. That's the one I come back to. Not because it was the biggest mistake. But because it was so easy. So casual. So small. And those are the ones that stay with you. The ones no one else saw. The ones that didn't require justification because they never had to be explained. Just you making a choice. And then living with it. I think about telling her. All of it. Not just the general version. The real one. The exact words. The choices. The moments like that. And I go back and forth. Constantly. Because part of me believes she deserves the truth. Fully. Not edited. Not softened. Just truth. But another part of me. And this is the part one don't trust. Wonders if that's still about me. If it's still me wanting something. Relief. Maybe. To say it out loud and feel. Lighter. Cleaner. Like I've finally paid some kind of emotional debt. But what does it give her? That's the question I can't answer. Does it help her? Does it give her clarity? Or does it just hand her something heavier to carry? Something she didn't ask for? Because once you say something like that, you can't take it back. You can't control how it lands. You can't shape what it becomes in someone else's mind. And I don't know if I have the right to do that. Not for my sake. So I sit with it. I go back and forth. Some days I feel sure I'll tell her. Other days I think I never will. And I don't know which one is right. I genuinely don't. What I do know is that what we have now, it's real. It's not perfect. It's not what it could have been. But it's real. And that matters. It matters more than I think I understood for a long time. But even now, even with everything we've built, that question is still there. Waiting. And I can feel it getting closer to a point where I won't be able to avoid it anymore. And I don't know what happens when I can't avoid it anymore. I keep thinking there's going to be some clear moment. Some right time. Where it all lines up and I'll just know, okay, this is when I tell her. This is when I say everything. But that moment hasn't come. And I'm starting to think it might not. Because the truth is, there's never a good time to tell someone you chose something else over them. There just isn't. No version of that conversation feels clean. No version of it lands without leaving something behind. What we have now, it's taken years to get here. Slow, careful steps. Learning each other in a way we probably should have done when she was little, but didn't. And now, at 23, she calls me sometimes just to talk. Not because she has to. Not because it's expected. But because she wants to. And every time that happens, there's this small part of me that still feels surprised. Grateful, yes, but also surprised. Like I'm being let into something I didn't fully earn. We have inside jokes now. That still feels strange to say. Inside jokes. The kind of thing that comes from shared time, shared moments, repetition. And sometimes I catch myself in those moments, laughing with her, talking easily, and there's this split second where I think, is this real? Like I'm waiting for it to disappear. A few weeks ago, she called me late. Later than she usually does. And I remember looking at my phone and feeling that old instinct, that quick flicker of hesitation. Not because I didn't want to answer, but because some part of me still expects distance. Still expects the relationship to be fragile. But I answered. Of course I answered. And she sounded tired. Not upset, not crying, just worn down. And we talked. Nothing dramatic. Just life. Stress. Things she was figuring out. And at one point, there was a pause. A quiet one. Not uncomfortable. Just there. And she said, I'm glad I called you. It was such a simple sentence. But it stayed with me. Because there was a time, not even that long ago, when that wouldn't have been true. Or at least, she wouldn't have said it. And that's the thing I keep coming back to. Not the big moments. Not the milestones. The small ones. The ones that build something quietly over time. Because those are the ones I missed before. Or didn't value the way I should have. I don't have a clean ending for this. I wish I did. I wish I could say, here's what I learned, here's what you should take from it, here's how it all resolved. But that wouldn't be honest. Because it's not resolved. Not completely. What I can say is that I'm not the same person I was. And I don't say that as a defense. Or a way to balance things out. It doesn't undo anything. It doesn't give me credit. It's just true. The woman who sat in that lawyer's office and said, easier. The woman who counted down the hours at school events. I understand her now. In a way I didn't before. I don't hate her the way I used to. I see how scared she was. How much she was trying to escape something she didn't even fully understand. But I'm not her anymore. And that matters. Even if it came too late for some things. I think the hardest part about being a parent. And I know that sounds like something people say all the time, but I mean it differently. The hardest part is that you don't get to redo it. You don't get to go back and try again with the same child, the same moments. You make decisions in real time. With whatever version of yourself you are at that point. And those decisions, they stay. They become part of your child's life. Whether you meant them to or not. You can apologize. You can grow. You can build something real later. But you can't erase what already happened. Maya is 23. She is exactly who she is. And some of that comes from Daniel. From Carol. From her own strength, her own personality, the way she moves through the world. And some of it comes from me. From my absence. From the space I left. From the things I didn't give her when she needed them. Both of those things are true. At the same time. And learning how to hold both of those truths without trying to cancel one out. That's been the hardest part. I love her. Completely. There's no question about that. But I also failed her. In real, specific ways. And those two things don't contradict each other. They just exist together. I don't know if I'll ever tell her everything. I think about it all the time. I go back and forth. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. And maybe the fact that I'm still unsure says something. I just don't know what yet. What I do know is this. I needed to say it. Somewhere. Out loud. Without adjusting it. Without softening it. Just as it is. Because when something only exists in your own head, you can keep reshaping it. Rewriting it. Making it easier to live with. But once you say it, it stays. It becomes real in a different way. And maybe that's the point. Not resolution. Not forgiveness. Just honesty. If you've listened this far, thank you. Really. Because I know this isn't an easy thing to sit with. It's not a clean story. It doesn't offer you anything simple. But if any part of it feels familiar, if you recognize something in it, even a little, then you probably already know what you've been avoiding. That's the thing about the truth. It doesn't usually surprise you. It just waits. You just have to decide if you're ready to face it. And I'm still deciding. Because if I do tell her, if I say all of it, exactly as it happened, there's one question I don't know how to answer. And I think that's the part that scares me the most.